Here we're going to look at box and whisker plots. So starting up at the top with the notes, let's just zoom in on this a little bit. It says another important application of quartiles is to represent data sets using box and whisker plots. And a box and whisker plot or box plot is an exploratory data analysis tool that highlights the important features of a data set. To graph a box and whisker plot, you must know the following values. Okay, so these 5 values are what we're going to need to know to use a box plot or a box and whisker plot. Those 5 values are going to be pulled from the calculator, and they are referenced or known as the 5-number summary. Okay. Once you have that 5-number summary, well, that's step 1, right? We find the 5-number summary. Then you're going to construct a horizontal scale. So you'll have a number line below that you'll base everything off of, and you'll see that in the example. Once you have that horizontal scale spanning the range of the data, you can move on to step 3, which is plot the 5 numbers above the horizontal scale. So those 5 numbers would be your minimum, your Q1, your median, your Q3, and your maximum. Those are going to be your 5-number summary. Okay, so those 5 there. And you'll see that each of those has a dot or a point that is associated with it. All right, above the horizontal scale from Q1 to Q3, so let me get rid of that so it doesn't get as cluttered. You'll draw a vertical line. So you'll draw a vertical line here and here at Q1 and Q3. I'm actually going to change the color of that. So do a line at Q1 and Q3, and then a vertical line in the box at Q2. So you'd have a line here, and then that's where our box would come from. So that's the box part of the box and whisker plot. The whisker is from your minimum entry to your box, and then from the box to the maximum entry. So you have a whisker on each side, the left and the right sides. Now, sometimes the whiskers will be the same side, sometimes one is longer than the other. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. But the main takeaway or the main thing you're looking at here is that you need the 5-number summary. You create a horizontal scale from that covers the whole range of your data. You plot those 5 points, draw a box from Q1 to Q3 with the vertical line at Q2 to represent the median, and then you can connect the whiskers. You'll have those dots there, then you just connect them. All right, so let's look at example 4. So now this is already worked out, so I'm just going to erase some of the kind of the stickers here so we'll be able to see it as we go. They tell us to draw a box and whisker plot that represents the data set, and what do you observe? So these 15 numbers are from the earlier examples, but the first thing we want to do is we need to determine the 5-number summary. So on our calculator, we would go to Stat, Edit, and then we would enter those 15 numbers. Now, to save some time here, I already entered those 15 numbers. Once those numbers have been entered, you then go back to Stat. We're going to go over to the right to Calculate, and we want to choose selection 1 variable stats, that first option. So we hit Enter. Make sure our list is the list that we entered our data into, which was list 1. If it's not, make sure you change that to the appropriate list. And then on the handheld TI-84s, you might see the word calculate. You want to go down, highlight that, and hit enter. My screen shows everything at once. On the handheld calculators, you will have to scroll down because we're looking for those last 5 numbers listed: the min x, the Q1, the median, the Q3, and the max x. Those 5 numbers on bottom, that's our 5-number summary. So if you look back to the paper here, the minimum, the Q1, Q2, Q3, and the maximum, I've pulled from the calculator. Now remember, the handheld calculators, you will have to scroll down to get to those 5 numbers. All right, we're then going to use those 5 numbers to construct the box and whisker plot. First thing I want to do is create some type of number line. Now, it's not too important. This is probably the least important part of it. But I have numbers from 11 to 35. So I've put a number line that spans, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, from 5 to 40, and I'm just going to go every 5 places. Now, those numbers will change depending on the problem, but for this example, 5 to 40 and going up by 5 is satisfactory, so we're going to use that. Once you have that number line plotted, above that, you're going to put the 5-number summary. So I'm going to put the 11 where the 11 would be, the 23, the 25, the 30, and the 35. I'm going to plot each one of those points above the number line in its respective spot. Once you have those 5 points plotted, now we can draw our actual box plot. The first thing you would do is you would draw a vertical line at each of the quartiles, so Q1, Q2, and Q3, and then you can draw a box to do that. You'd fill in the box, so I would shade that, and then you'll have this dot here already and this dot here already. You just connect the whiskers to the box, and now you have your box and whiskers plot. It is relatively straightforward. You just want to make sure that your number line's accurate. We want to have this scaled out as best we can. If you are drawing these by hand, the scale might be off just slightly. You're drawing sketches of it, it's not going to be perfect, but we do want to make it as accurate as we possibly can. All right, so that would be the actual construction of the box and whisker plot. Then we want to work on some interpretation. So this first sentence here says the box represents about half of the data, which means about 50% of the data. So 50% of your data should fall between Q1 and Q3, right? So that would be within the box. We already know that. Those entries are going to be between 23 and 30. So about half of our entries, half of our data, falls between Q1 and Q3, which in this case is 20 and 30. My next statement would be that the left whisker represents about 1/4, that should say quarter. That should be 1/4, sorry about that. 1/4 of the data, so about 25% of the data entries are less than 23. So you have about 25% of your data is on that whisker. About 50% is within that box, which leaves the other 25% on the right whisker, which is going to be our next statement. So the right whisker represents about 1/4 of the data. So about 25% of that data entry are going to be greater than 30. So if we were to break this up, you have about 25% here in that left whisker, about 25% here in the right whisker, and then your other 50% falls within that box between Q1 and Q3. I'm just going to erase those boxes so they don't get too cluttered. And then finally, we could say the length of the left whisker is much longer than the right one, indicating that the data set has a possible outlier to the left. So what's going to happen with your whiskers is if that one whisker is much longer than another one, that's your clue or your hint that there's probably an outlier in this data set. Now from the previous examples, when we went back to example 3, we did notice that 11 was an outlier, and this box and whisker plot confirms that. So example 3 confirms example 4, example 4 confirms example 3. We can see that 11 has been pulled pretty far away from the rest of our data. And then finally, it says you can use a box and whisker plot to determine the shape of a distribution. Notice that the box and whiskers plot in example 4, which I just mentioned, represents a distribution that is skewed left. So this would be skewed left because there's an outlier to the left. You're going to see different box and whisker plots can be skewed left or right. If the left whisker is longer, much longer, then it's skewed left. If the right whisker is skewed much longer, it is skewed right. If the whiskers are about the same size or close to the same size, then it's just usually a symmetric distribution. So if everything looks balanced, you're looking at symmetric. That is it for this video in terms of explanations. You need the 5-number summary. Once you have that number line, plot those points, draw your box, and then connect your whiskers.